of course, accordingly. So I'll cross over to Ayub, who will be giving us the discussion of the day. My panel, or the panel, is all set. Mike Olieo, Ben Kinuthia, and Andrew Franklin. And of course, alongside Ayub, I'll be joining them also as we get to discuss much more on matters of politics. There's so much so on matters politics to be discussed. Kibra politics. And we also have a couple of other things that we'll be discussing. The border road that is there between Kenya and Somalia. Farmajo says no to us. That then means we have to settle this at the level of the ICJ. What does it mean for Kenya? Is there someone who slept on their job? Could this have been addressed earlier before it reached that point of the ICJ? Somalia remains adamant. What does it mean then for the regional balance is what we'll be discussing. That alongside, of course, the deadline that is today on using the old currency, that is the 1,000 note. And even as that report comes from our very own Ode Francis, who toured some regions in the country and, you know, in a way got these complaints from people who argued that it's, you know, rural area on their very own regions, and they do not have banks, they do not have access to banks where they could go and change their monies. Where does this place them? Of course, every other Kenyan who struggled so hard towards getting the money that they got upon that ruling that quashed the bid by Okia Mtata to say that, of course, maybe the current new notes that are coming in, the 1,000 notes, are not in the best of state because of having a picture of the founding father, that is Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. So we discussed that and much, much more. We equally wish to get your sentiments. Hashtag NewDayKE, SMS short code 40920 as we expound that and much more. Ayub, I throw it back to you to introduce the guests as we proceed with the broadcast.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and thank you to you too for choosing to stay with us here on the program. Andrew Franklin is security and political commentator. At the center is Ben Kinuthia, constitutional lawyer, and equally commentates on matters that do develop in the country. Michael Yeo on my immediate right is public policy analyst. Gentlemen, I do appreciate your time. Good morning.
Thank you.
And it's equally pertinent we start with what's developing in the country. In about 8 hours' time, the banknote, the old banknote, will be not legally binding as per the law. And that, again, is going to be having consequences. That is going to be devastating to those who hoard or do stash cash. And this is what's going to be of legal tender in the country now. Basically, this is what we are going to be having. So the old note will be out of circulation. But the Sunday paper does report that by August, about 100 billion Kenya shillings had been exchanged, which nearly is out of the 217 billion Kenya shillings that was to be replaced in the country. A lot of talking points here, but to start with you, Ben Kinuthia at the center. When you look at the mystery of the missing billions in this country, this stashed or hoarded cash, and the accusations that there are many Kenyans who have been doing that for a long period of time, do you think this demonetization campaign has been successful for the past couple of 3 months since the 1st of June during the Madaraka Day celebration?
A very good morning, and thank you for starting with me. I think it depends on how you look at it, because there were two things that this demonetization was supposed to achieve. The first one is to try and bring cash that was stashed into the economy. And the second one is to make sure that those people who got some cash illegally end up losing that money. And I think the second one has been achieved. I pity someone who is serving a jail sentence somewhere in Kamiti who had probably robbed a bank, dug up a hole and put a few millions in a box and was just waiting to finish. He's probably finishing his term in a year. And he had been doing all his calculations while in prison and saying, when I go back home, I have some 14 million, which I had dug up. Because there are people who commit a crime, and they prefer to serve a jail term, knowing that they'll go back to their backyard, dig up a hole, and there'll be 5-6 million waiting for them, and they can start life afresh. So I'm imagining that person is going to leave prison, and immediately they get back home, they realize they have a lot of paper that they can use to light a jiko. We also have drug barons and people who have done illicit trade, who are incapable of exchanging that money back. And because they are too mean, they will not give it out to charity and they will not do anything with it, the deadline will find them and that money will be locked out of the economy. So it achieves both objectives. It achieves the objective of making sure that people who got money in an illegal manner, that money becomes useless because they are unable to bank it. And two, it threatens those who have been using a mattress account, so to speak, and makes them feel the need to start bringing that money back into the formal economy.
Well, this might have sounded as though it was targeting the people who had achieved money illegally. We have just done a report by our very own Odi Francis, who toured all the way to the sides of Mandera, Wajir and everything, and got the stories of people who still have their very own cash simply because they do not have access to banking facilities. And this is not because this is something that is happening across the country. You will talk to Maasais and they'll tell you they will sell their cows and they'll just put their money somewhere. And right now, the deadline is here. They do not have access where they can take their monies for changing and all that. So they clearly have lost it, or maybe their monies have been locked out of the economy. What does this then mean? A constitutional requirement, but did we think through it before coming to this point of saying that it should be implemented in this kind of direction, Mike, before we come to you, Andrew?
By and large, Kenya is a cash economy. A very small fraction of Kenyans operate with credit cards.
Right.
Everything in Kenya is done on a cash basis. Farmers are paid in cash. All our loans we get in cash. The CBK still has very many questions to answer about the way they went about this thing. And I want, in my opinion, this thing has not succeeded as they ought. They wish to.
As earlier planned.
Yes, because by close of business on Friday, only 116 million pieces had been converted.
Of the 217.
Of the
Meaning
217.
nearly half is out there.
Meaning nearly half is out there, which means they have not achieved. That is 53% success rate. Right. So where is the 47%? There can only be two things. Either those who are holding the money, the people who are targeted were smarter than the CBK, or we may be faced with a situation of fictitious figures from the CBK itself. Probably that was not even the figure of the money in circulation. Right. Okay? So at the end of the day, the CBK will have to answer some of these questions. Where is this money? Why would anybody, assuming that Andrew here or even Linda, you have this kind of money with you, would you just let it go without a fight?
No.
And there is no complainant?
And you worked hard for it.
And you worked hard for it?
For sure. You will fight.
So Njoroge needs to tell us, where is this money? Either the figures he gave us were fictitious, or the guys who had this money became smarter.
Yeah.
All right. Andrew, then when I come to you, of course, you have vast amount of experience when it comes to money laundering and fraud and the effect, the consequences it has had on the economy. We'll come to the M-Pesa outlets, the agents, how that has been circulating, led to, of course, what we have witnessed in the country regarding, of course, the attacks. But equally, despite the process of the CBK coming up with a new banknote being top secret, classified, let's say, for that matter, those who have been hoarding or stashing cash managed to change their currency in the foreign currency in the country before even the CBK launched the new banknote at by of course the governor in presence of President Uhuru Kenyatta during the Madaraka Day celebrations in Narok County. And historically, when you see that, in the cases of Zimbabwe, Libya, North Korea have failed to do that in terms of wanting to reach the far-reaching consequences of wanting a positive outcome out of this. And we know that in contemporary Kenya, corruption does not happen only among those who handle cash. There are some who don't, and corruption is equally cashless in this country. So how does the central bank manage to fill up the vacuum of the 47% nearly mentioned by Michael Yeo by close of business tonight?
Well, one aspect to keep in mind is that when we look at people like Bashir in Khartoum with vast amounts of cash stashed away, Kenya is a very sophisticated economy whose financial system is absolutely integrated into the world's financial systems. And the global flows of money that go through Nairobi and elsewhere are real. We have 6 financial services sectors in this country, including pensions and provident funds, insurances, SACCOs, banking, and the like. You'll remember that when this demonetization, so-called, of the 1,000 shilling note, only the 1,000 shilling note, as of today, was announced, it was announced as a means of defeating corruption. Now, CBK has important roles to play in fighting corruption. That is, fight money laundering. to fight the illicit financial flows. It has banking fraud unit to prevent the fraudulent looting of our bank accounts. But what this exercise has indicated is something that when you do not have a consolidated financial services authority in a relatively small economy, sophisticated economy, you really have no idea about what your liquidity is in your country. So it makes it almost impossible to say, this is our central bank rate. This is what we need to fight inflation. This is what we need to stimulate our economy. We're going to set the loan rate. We cap the rates at 14%, but we don't know what that really does. And the banks give us, their idea, their voodoo economics, which is that we don't lend because the cap is too low, and therefore we're only lending to the government anyway. And we won't lend to anybody else unless the government stops borrowing, which is what the bankers here do. They don't give you a straight story. The fact that we have 101 million ghost notes that are where? We don't think, I believe there's a fair amount in circulation. I think the problem is that if we haven't seen, and we haven't heard any figures from Safaricom about large amounts of money going through M-Pesa, an abnormal amount of money, not because it's bad, but because people are saying, I've got to get my money to somebody, and I'm in Mandara, Garissa, Wajir, there's no banks here. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, but there always is. See, Safaricom likes to tell us how much mobile money outlets and how vital they are to the community. But where have been the inflows into M-Pesa? That's, I mean, my initial reaction, if I were fortunate enough to have a stash of legacy notes, would have been to put them in my M-Pesa account. That's not a problem. Again, we've also lost track of all the sports betting wallets. That's an excellent way to launder money through betting accounts, some of which have been closed, some of which have been reopened. We are aware of that.
Some ending the operations.
Some have been ending their operations. What has happened to the cash there? There are any number of questions to be answered, but I think the fact that we have 47% of the notes we thought were in circulation are either still in circulation. That's a tremendous hit to an economy, to lose $1 billion as of 4 p.m. today, when banks will no longer be accepting the old notes. That's a tremendous hit to take it out. And quite frankly, I don't believe the deadline will stand. I believe...
Are there possibilities?
I don't believe the deadline will stand. I believe we're going to see all manner of people screaming about how it needs to be extended because of what Linda has just mentioned. My constituents who are selling camels today.
Right.
My constituents who are not part of your formal banking system.
Which is your constituency?
But anyway, well, it will not tell us. But all I said, I think that is what he said from day one. From that time, of course, this was declared. Yes. Andrew said that there were likelihoods that the deadline would be extended.
I believe so.
We would not be surprised because when you look at such Kenyans, complaining and crying, foul about this, then it gets you a little bit scared because in the event that, you expect your economy to flourish, there has to be presence and, of course, proper circulation of the money. So if they are left with this 1,000 notes that, have been officially rendered useless, what does it, of course, then mean for the economy? Because then when we come back to the history of demonetization of funds, a couple of countries have done that successfully. And when we say successfully, we also do not overlook the fact that they've also gone through tough economic times in trying to balance this. Zimbabwe has not found it very easy. India itself found it very tough. Europe itself at some point in time, Pakistan, they all will tell you, yes, we successfully did this, but it was a little bit hard balancing the economy. So what then do we do as a country towards ensuring that we do not fall into trouble in as much as maybe there's going to be an extension or something of the sort?
Excuse me, Lynn, one point. Think about $1 billion going out of circulation tonight in this country. $1 billion gone. Wiped off the books, wiped out of people's consuming patterns, just gone. Or as Mr. Knuthia says, he can be used to light Chicos.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, so I mean, aren't we scared that we would land in such a situation where, of course, then economically we'll have really done a disadvantage to us?
Interesting. I think, first and foremost, 3 months was a long time. The problem we have is that even in picking up a Huduma number, it was
Yes.
actually 4 months. Even in picking up a Huduma number, we wait until the last minute. In fact, this is one deadline that I have not seen anybody raise their hand and say they want extended. Apart from now that interesting story that you've covered in Mandera where they do not have banking services. But anybody in Nairobi, what excuse would they have for not having brought their money? I think what central bank would do is to create a special kind of waiver or extension for specific areas. Like they can tell banks, we've specifically given you an opportunity, or tell the people of Mandera, for example, where you see there's a genuine reason that we've given you a window period of 48 hours. Close everything you're doing, bring your money to these banks, the banks will receive them, the central bank will accept them. But for someone in Nairobi, someone in Kericho, someone in Nakuru, someone in Mombasa, people who have M-Pesa next to them and so on and so forth, it doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
So I think we are not going to lose that $1 billion, because I can tell you also, when you look at the value of the dollar, our shilling has lost quite considerably against the dollar and against the euro, and even against the South African rand. So it tells you that these people were clever enough to buy some rands, they were clever enough to buy Japanese yen,
Yes.
they were clever enough to even to buy the Chinese yuan. If you just look at the stocks and you look at the shilling against especially the dollar, it has really lost.
Right.
So what has happened, and central bank needs to tell us, is the dollars have been purchased a lot. The Japanese and the Chinese people, these people are just buying foreign currency and keeping it.
But they were buying it with shillings.
Yes, they were buying
So
it with
where
shillings.
did those shillings